Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today. A couple of administrative items. Let's see, if you have a camera, if you can put it on, that would be great so I can see your faces. And I do try and make this as interactive as possible. So there will be times when I will be posing questions to the floor, and appreciate any and all input anybody can provide from any perspective, because this is a learning opportunity for all of us in a lot of different ways. So I'm Catherine Mannion. I go by Kat or Catherine, and you see me on some of these other calls. I'm the quality manager for the company. I also am the safety manager, and I've been managing projects for 30 plus years. So I've been around the block a few times, and the session that I'm leading today with Sue is on project execution. And what that means is, if you look at the first slide, or go to the second slide there, progress it a couple slides. So here's where we are. Made it to session 4. So if you look at our image of project management, we talked about initiating the project, planning the project. This week, we're talking about executing the project. There is some overlap between topics in this session as with other previous sessions and upcoming sessions, because it all is project management is an iterative process. So you'll be hearing some of the same terms that you learned already and that you'll be hearing in upcoming sessions. So I just wanted to mention that. But today we're going to be talking about basically starting off right and staying on track, how we do that, including where resources are specifically on their internet for everybody to see where they are, building the record, which is good. Obviously, we want to have a good record, good project record for a number of different reasons, leadership and communication, quality management, including QA and QC, and managing the client. So I will say that I could spend a day talking about almost any one of these topics. So, and I think that goes for most of our PM sessions. This is a very, targeted, succinct training session that we've put together for it's multidisciplinary across the company. If at any point you've got questions, use the raise your hand function. So I'm happy to entertain, questions and comments during the course of the training, of course, today. But because there is a lot of information in here, I like to say up front that if there's something that you are questioning or have one additional information on, I'm available at any time to take any calls or be part of a team meeting or whatever would be of most help for you. So let's see. We are going to be moving along now to a slide that should look a little bit familiar to you. So at the beginning of the training, Mike Winterrow went over this slide, and I'm bringing it up again because it's the basis of what we're doing. So in order to have good project management, you've got to be managing your risk, and all the processes and procedures and everything that we're going to be talking about today, including how to manage your client. Even though it's a soft skill, it is a way that we're managing risks in our business. And as we're managing projects. So we'll be touching on several of these today. Next slide. So you get your team together, and then everybody's looking up with arrows because they don't know where to go. So it's our job as a project manager to get everybody on the same page, get them going in the right direction, and keep them going in the right direction. And this is incredibly hard. I can tell you, having done this for many years, the way that we do this is by starting off right, making sure everybody has a kickoff, which we talked about previously, communicating what the plan is for the project, communicating to the team any changes as they occur so that everybody's on the same page and knows what's going on, and then managing the client during this whole process, and then documenting all the above. So these are like the basic pieces of how we go about our business as project managers. I have this note on here about losing sight of the forest for the trees. Can anybody guess why I've got that on this slide?
Probably because it's easy to do and we all do it. because we're
Absolutely.
anal about how we approach our projects and designs and get lost in it at times.
Yep. So for some of us who are wearing two hats as both the project manager and as like the technical lead, design lead, it's easy to kind of get down into the weeds, be looking at that tree in the forest. And as a project manager, one of the most important skills you're going to have is the ability to put your PM hat on, get out of the weeds, get out of the trees and take a look at the whole forest. Because we as a technical lead might get stuck in the weeds, but our staff members on our teams are gonna get stuck in the weeds, right? If I'm working in my technical specialty, I think it's wonderfully interesting. And I'm gonna go down all these cool pathways and think about things, but then the project manager's job is kind of pull us all back. Okay, that's a great idea, but maybe that's not, if it's not in scope, making sure people understand what's in scope, what's not scope, making sure have a good sight of what the client's looking for, that they can set all the team members see what the forest is. So your job is kind of pull everybody back up again. Okay. So I have a little link here to something that I think is fun. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to actually, Heather, can you click on the link? Because I don't think it'll work if I click on it from here. It has worked in the past. I have great hopes that it will work. So people joke about this, that project management is like herding cats. And I think that it is probably fairly accurate. And I like to start off with this image, just provide a little bit of something a little bit fun at the beginning to get us all engaged. And if you haven't seen it before, it's definitely worth it.
I hope everyone can hear it. So my apologies if not. You'll get the link in the slide if not.
Okay.
This man right here is my great grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
These are all your technicians on your project.
Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle, hold them together 10 bells and half wild short hairs. Or that's another thing altogether. Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this morning right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Heather. So, yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing, right? We've got all of our team members. We got to keep them moving in the same direction. They're going to wander off, but it's our job as the project managers to keep them in the right direction. And at the end of the day, you're getting the project out to the client. Okay, so let's see. So I have a couple of questions to pose to you guys today. Our system for having them pop up on the screen is not currently up. So I wanted to ask everybody, and maybe you can just put a little note in the chat function, if you know where to find the project management resources that you need to do your job, like templates and forms and guides and whatnot. So if anybody. But let's see, seeing as how I can see almost everybody, why don't you raise your hand if you know where to find them? All right, so that's a pretty good number. Okay, that's a pretty good number. Great. Yes, LaBella intranet, that is the home. Let's go to the next page. And I will show you this, and then I will show a few specific things actually on the intranet itself. So there's lots of different tools and ways to manage a project, and they're going to vary. They may vary. They're going to vary by division, and whether or not it's a single task or a multiple task project, it's going to vary. So all of the resources that you need are going to be on the intranet, and there are different spots to go to. I'm going to take the screen away and just do a quick. Let's see, share. Can you all see? Nodding heads, excellent. Okay, so this is the home page. So the majority of the resources you're going to be getting from the quality GPS, which is our quality management system page. Okay, you're going to go here and you can see we organized this last year. So this page now has a combination of project management resources as well as our quality resources. they go hand in hand. You can't have good quality without good PM and vice versa. So they're all on the same page. And then down here, this is a list of all the tools from the programs. And then we added links here to the different pages within the internet where you will find other information that pertains to project management, like the marketing CRM Central. As project managers, we learned about CRM in an earlier session. Here's where you can go directly to that page and get that information. Similarly, here's a link to legal. If you go to the legal page, you're going to go to the contracts information and you'll see all the standard agreements and all that good information there. Okay, so everything can be accessed from this page here. We also have on this page PDFs of the presentations that you're listening to, as well as a round of the recordings that we did earlier. So I mentioned this because if you're working with other staff on your team who are coming up in the PM world or need to understand perhaps like how the process works because they're newer and they haven't been part of a team before, these information is here we're transparent as a company. This information is there for people to take a look at. Okay. So are there any, has everybody, okay, raise your hands again. People, have you seen this page before? You kind of know what's there, and is there anything in particular that you have a question about? Nope. All right. So let's see here. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of these forms here, just so you can get a sense of what's what. So let me go just open up. Where is it here? So there's one document here I wanted to show you. Actually, can you take the screen back can you take the screen back, Heather, and just let's go a couple slides farther in the PowerPoint.
Yep, can you stop sharing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, so.
Okay.
There we go. So this is all the information. All these links are on the page that I showed you. So next page.
Okay.
So these are some of the specific resources that pertain to our quality management system. Okay. So in the, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the box here that starts with quality policy statement, these are all documents that came specifically from our QMS program. And you can see our program is designed to kind of follow the project management flow, monitoring and controlling, course correction, improvement, contract execution. Those are all elements of project management and quality that kind of go together. And this information is on if you click on these documents, you'll be able to learn more. I can't go through everything in detail today. I apologize, but there's just a lot of good stuff there. So next slide. So there are quite a few forms and templates that we have available for use for projects. And we also have some staff within the company also use Newformer, which is a completely different program, which I am not able to really speak to because I don't have a lot of experience with it. If you do have questions, Sue Matzat will be able to answer them because she has knowledge of Newformer. I don't know. Can you raise your hand if you use Newformer? Anybody on this call? Okay. A couple. Okay. All right. So Sue, would you be willing to just give like a snapshot note about how Newformer functions, just so everybody kind of knows? Because even if you're not using it, you're going to hear about it within the company. I think it's important.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, it's a document management tool software. And we use it quite a bit in the architectural division for managing the construction phase of projects. So submittal, tracking, and logging, RFIs, etc. But we also can use it for the design phase of projects. So storing meeting minutes. And if you have seen in Outlook, you can move email into a project folder that then gets stored in Newformer, and it has a robust search function and storage for all of your project documentation. Not not as a replacement for the project folder on the network, but just as a storage email organization. And there's lots more detail. I believe there's still some new format tutorials on the internet. So if you were to just search the word new forma, some of those would come up. And if anybody wants to know more about that, I can certainly point you in the right direction.
Thank you, Sue. So going back to the slide here, we've got standard forms. Those are all, I'm going to take, can you give me the, here, I'm going to take the screen again. I'm going to steal it. There we go. Oh, looks like it came up already. Excellent. So if you go here to the main page, right, our PM GPS page, if you click on operations forms, I'm sure you're kind of already aware of this page, but this page has a lot of good information resources across the board, and not just for project management. But if you go down here for forms and tools, you'll see this is where we've got the firm-wide billing rates. We've got a contract modification short form, which is just an easier way to get a change, a contract modification out to the clients. We get paid for our hard work. Some construction bulletin form, information on the PIF templates, cover sheets, you know, all kinds of good information is here, including some safety information and our letterhead and whatnot. So this page is a lot of good information resources. I'm going to click on one of these, which is, I'm going to go back. So see, you can just go easily go back. I'm going to show you guys something that we put up here, which was not, it has not been officially like put out to the entire company officially. It's something that we have, but it's discussed during project management training. But I'm just saying I haven't done like an entire company announcement about it. But this is kind of a short version of, it's called a project plan. It allows you to pull together information at the beginning of a project that will help you succeed with management of the project. It includes sections for describing what the phases are, identifying who the team members are, understanding what the client success factors are. Like if we are working on a project and we're asking them, they're asking us to build a house, do we know that they want it to be blue and not purple? Like just what is really important for the client for them to think the project is a success and to think that LaBella is wonderful? How are we going to manage change on a project? How are we going to communicate, document distribution, deliverables, QA, QC, all kinds of good stuff is on here. So this is a nice one pager to kind of like help you as you're getting started in project management or later on in your career. It's just a good, even just a good checklist to kind of go through, make sure you've got everything in place. Then there is a page for team contact information. So if you have a large project, especially, it's important to make sure you've got this documented, and not just with internal folks, but if you have external consultants, this is a form you can fill out and put that information in there. Then there's a kickoff checklist in addition to the other kickoff document that we have on our website. And then this is one that I've used in the past. It's in here. Something's going to change as soon as the project starts. It's just guaranteed. So depending on how your client wants to manage change, you may have a task that's set up for the client for small changes along the way, or if you have a discussion with them and they're comfortable and you're comfortable, you can make a little note of small changes along the way and make sure that everybody's on the same page with how we're getting paid for those changes. Because if it's a change and it's not assumed in our original proposal scope, we need to be paid for our extra time, right? If we ask somebody to build us a house and we ask them and their contract doesn't specify how many square feet it's going to be, it's a problem because we might be on the hook for building more than we anticipated. Likewise with consulting, we need to make sure our scope is clear. And if it's something that's out of scope, we need to make sure it's documented on here so we can get additional money for that. All right, so that is one document. We also have this modification short form, which is up here, which is we're gonna be updating the formatting in a little bit. But essentially, when you have a change on a project, this allows you to quickly fill in the information, get it out to the client and get them to sign off rather than having to do a whole big formal proposal for the change. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint. Any questions about any of that? No? Does anybody have an example of a project where they are aware that, for instance, like a change modification form was not submitted and we ended up providing services for free? It's happened. Yes, Jeff. Anything you want to share? Any fun stories?
It wasn't here yet, but just I find managing client scope creep is the toughest part because you're trying to appease them. And they will some clients are really bad at it and will keep changing their mind. And before you know it, if you're not tracking it, you get to the end of the project, you're like, we're way over budget, I don't know why. And if you're not tracking it, it's tough to go back and ask for it. And if you do it at the end of it, I find they won't ever pay because I tell people who work for me, it's like when you build a house, if the contractor knows there's a problem up front and they don't say it and they wait until the end and it's all done and they say, oh, and it's gonna cost more, you find you're not happy about that.
Yep.
And you won't pay. If it's early on, you're not happy about it, but you accept it and you will eventually pay. So that's, it's hard to do at first and you think you have this big budget available, but it always goes quickly and you always run out eventually.
Yeah, it's death. It's often death by 1,000 cuts. You know, you think this one little thing is only going to take this much longer, and then you add them all up, and by the end, you've run out of money. You're over budget, and that's why we talk a lot about client communication. Is really important to keep them up to speed, and that's why I like that one particular form. Like I could even send them that form that with all the different little changes that they wanted, so that they have some sort of documentation that we're on the same page with what's going on. And it is really hard to ask for more money. We're all just like, a lot of us are people pleasers. We just want to like do what's best for the client and put out a good product. But we do need to get paid for our work and for our brains. That's why we're here. So anyways, thanks, Jeff. That's a good example. I like the house examples. It's very easy to.
Kat,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
I can.
Obviously, you
George.
said, yeah. Can you go back to that short form for a second, please?
Yeah, actually, if you go.
Well, can you add like imagery to that? I wish I knew about that because I just did I had to add for topography for a job that was already ongoing.
Right.
And so this would have been nice because it would have saved all that time putting together the normal paperwork that we do when preparing a proposal.
Full proposal, yeah.
So
It's just an add-on for
right.
another
So it
thing.
would have been nice to have this. I could have just sent them this. They could sign it, give them this is for topography, for, site distances for the road, for DOT. And then, but also, like I always give an image of where we're working. So, it kind of limits what the area that I'm working in to that particular, line
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
can you add an image to this? Or would it, I guess I could do it myself and just attach it with this form
Yep.
in my email. So,
Yeah, but that's a good point. I can, in the reformatting that we're going to do, I can put a little note on here just about, provide attachments as necessary. We have that note on some of our other documents, but especially for survey work, like you mentioned, it's really important to make sure it's very clear, like what parcel we're specifically doing this work for. Sometimes clients try and like say, oh, but we thought you were also doing it for this parcel. Like, nope, here's the map. Here's what we're doing the work.
exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, well, that's good.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I have a question then as well.
Yeah.
So if we were to prepare this form, it gets filled out, it gets authorized by the client. Would this then go to our billing person who would then take the description and enter it into our Deltec and like open that portion of the project up? Would that be the chain of events?
So anytime you have a project, right, you start out with you create your PIF, you send your PIF along with the authorization to accounting. So accounting knows that, yes, we've been authorized to do this. The same process applies to when we're adding a phase or adding additional services to a project. So
TSCO.
Yeah. So this is essentially what at Chazen we call the TSCO. We've renamed it. It's no longer called a change order because within the construction world, change order has a very specific meaning. This is not a change order. We're modifying the contract or the proposal that we have with the client. So that's why it's called contract modification form, just so you know. That was something that we did last year. So the process is the same. You get this filled out, you send it to your biller. Depending on the biller and what the new phase is or what you're doing, they either do or don't require a new PIF.
Okay.
So you sometimes have to provide a new PIF. If anytime you are adding a new phase that has a new work group in the company, like if you are adding, you have a project and you're adding a survey phase, right? And so George's team needs to be you need to make the change to the PIF.
Okay.
That is because the PIF is used to make sure that all the permissions to the folders for the project file access are in place. Because if you don't do that, and accounting doesn't really understand, necessarily like who's within, if they see a survey phase, they're not going to know, oh, this other group of people now needs to have access to the project folder.
Right.
So, yep. Thanks. That's a good clarification point. Any other questions from anybody on any of these good things? No?
I just had one that might make sense to house it in the contract folder instead, because that's where I tried to find it in the past and thought it might be there, or have a link to it from there. Because maybe that's where a lot of people are trying to find it and don't think we have one for the speed form to do the change. Just a thought.
Yep, that's a good point. I can work on that. And everybody knows we are going to be having a new intranet later on in the summer, early fall. So some of this will be reorganized, but either way, there's always going to be some sort of link for the PMs to get to the information that they need. But we're working on building it right now. So, okay. All right, let's back to the presentation, Heather. Okay, so this is where we were. Quick note on the bottom right-hand side of this is we have a spot on the intranet under LaBella U for course recordings. Moving forwards, our course recordings are going to be housed in LaBella U, which is our new learning with the new learning management system as part of LaBella U. So there will be more coming out of that in the future, but I'm sure you've all heard we've got this new learning management system. It replaces all the programs that we were using in the past for training. It's one spot to house all the training courses. So now all of our new hires and existing hires will just have one spot to link into when they are doing their trainings. So, okay. All righty, next slide. So this is the workbook that I showed you live from the internet. Next slide. Again, these are some of the resources I showed you. This is our short form health and safety plan. It's all, the link to this is on the page with all the forms. Any project where we are going out into the big bad world, into the field, we need to have at least a short form health and safety plan in the project folder so people know what to expect when they're getting out there. We spend a whole other day talking about health and safety, as you know, but if you've got questions on this, when to do them, where to find them, let me know. We would like to create a library for each division of the standard tasks that we're doing in the field. So we've got one in a library, and then you can pull them into your projects. So more will be coming on that as time goes on. Next slide. Okay, building the record. So my question for you is, have you ever not been able to find something that you needed in the project folder? Raise your hand. Everybody, right? Rich, you're not raising your hand. Okay. We've all been there, right? You know, somebody says, I need you to pull this together. You go, you can't find it. Or a year has passed since the end of the project and you need to go back and find something because they call you and they say, we need you to, add a wetland survey onto this task. You can barely remember what you did last week versus like 2 years ago. So having a good project record is important for efficiency. So everybody's working off the same documents and making sure that we've got a good record for when things don't always go the way that we think they're going to go. So one of the ways that we like to think about this is if the information that you have in your project record is enough to do this. Will it document, if I'm brand new coming into the project, will I be able to figure out how the project started, what submissions were made, what changes occurred and why, who did what, who reviewed it, and then what approvals did we get? Because I can tell you for a fact that when we start the project, things are going to change. You're going to get to the end. And if you're just looking at the original scope of work and the final work product, they are not going to be the same. You know, probably 9 times out of 10, there's going to be some little tweaks along the way. So it's really important that we have a good project record to document what those changes are. All right, next slide. Okay, so how do we do this? I love this little cartoon. I thought it was wonderful. So we do keep track of where we bury things, right? All of us, when working on projects, we try and do the best we can to control the folder structure so that things are in a logical location. But it is really important that we know where all the information is stored and that the people that are on our team know how things are being organized. So I'm not going to read through all these. They're pretty much, I think, pretty standard. I'm wondering if anybody on the call today has an example of when they could not find something or what's something that they're doing to make sure things are kept in an organized fashion. For this,
I got this is Brian.
hey, Brian.
For us, you know, we're working with Avant-Grid and most of our stuff, but you know, we follow ISO 9001 or QMS process. So for our large projects, everything gets documented. There's very specific file types that need to be documented within there.
Mhm.
And then on our projects, you know, we have a doc controller that is help managing, you know, sitting in on projects to help manage that information and to be an advocate to say, hey, this needs to be documented or
Wow.
and how. So
I didn't realize that it went to that extent. You actually have somebody who's dealing with the documents and.
yeah. So we have dedicated personnel, you know, spread across different projects. They're required to capture and to codify them and then be able to speak to. They actually, you know, help assist or drive during internal and external audits. So throughout the audits, they're taking in what's, you know, what the auditor's asking, and they know exactly where everything is. They have their own document. So they have they manage all the files, but they also have all their own, you know, file tracking, so to speak, you know, like an Excel file of where everything is and when it was put in and what revision it is.
Wow.
All that.
So at the company at LaBella, we do a similar thing when it comes to our policy documents. So that's interesting. I hadn't realized that for the PGMS for the Avant-Grid projects that it's that detail oriented, which is great. Most of I think the company and the other divisions, it's not going to be quite that organized. We do have the folder structure, which is intended to capture things in a consistent location. I do see that Jeff Leibowitz put in a note that if something's outdated, they added it to the archive folder. So just the most updated information is in the file folder. So. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so, look at that, almost as if I planned this. The LaBella folder structure. Everybody knows we have a LaBella folder structure now. Previous to last year, we did not have an official folder structure that was consistent across the company. Sue headed this effort up, and a lot of effort went into putting something together that would be a close enough fit across the company that it would be implementable across all divisions. It was rolled out in 2022. And like I said here, it was the first ever. So LaBella it's a big company. We've grown a lot. Previous to this time, everybody was using different folder structures. And the idea is that if we have a base file organization structure that's consistent across the organization, guess what? As our team members grow on a project or a project changes from A to B, people will know where to find the information. It's just more efficient. We have had some feedback that it's not always perfect, you know, across across the board, that there might be empty folders, but you got to keep in mind just that, you know, we're a company of 1,500 people and we have a lot of divisions. Even within each division, we've got a lot of different specialties. So to try and come up with something that you're never going to make everybody happy all the time, but this it was a really good outline for, you know, 90% of the, you know, 95%, 99% of the projects. There's times when needs a little tweak here and there, but it's actually been very, very helpful in making sure people can find what they need. Let's see. So, and I think everybody knows that it gets set up after you submit your PIF. This is one of the triggers. When you submit your PIF to the system, the email goes out to a lot of different people, including the people who are setting up the folders. So, okay. Next slide, please. So you might have noticed back, oh gosh, let's see, I think it was 2 months ago, as the Organizational Knowledge Committee, which is one of our quality management system committees, put together a guidance document on how best to name documents in emails, et cetera. Does everybody raise your hand if that sounds remotely familiar? Okay, I've got a few non-raised hands. So I'm going to very quickly, if you can give me back the screen, Heather. I wonder if I can just take it. So, whoops. So you go to the magical quality GPS page where there's everything you need. This document here, guide for document filing, new is the document. It's pretty succinct. It's only a couple of pages long. It goes through very briefly the why, right? We want to have some sort of consistent formatting, naming convention throughout the company. Why? Brave soul, Brittany. Why we want to have some sort of consistency. Nobody?
They're easy to find.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so that we're, again, just like the file structure. It isn't necessary that everything be named exactly the same. That is just not possible because we have too many different service types and locations and different types of projects, but some sort of consistency is always good so that we can find things. So outlined why this is for use across the entire company. Okay, not just limited to a particular group. Using document templates is important. Not using illegal characters. I love that term. These are illegal characters and symbols, some of which I didn't realize before we put this together. But if you put these characters in document or subject lines, they can cause corruption later on. And I know this firsthand because I was a huge fan of the ampersand. Love the ampersand. Put in all my file names for years. And then I went to pull things from our electronic archive and it wouldn't work. And I was like, IT, the world has ended. I can't get this file opened. And they're like, well, you put the ampersand. So they had to do some magic behind the scenes. They got rid of it and I can get it open. So these are illegal characters. Please don't use them. Keep path names short. Internal emails to the extent that it makes sense for the team and the project, because I've gotten some feedback on this, including the project number, if not in the subject line, and the text is helpful to make sure everybody knows what project and what phase they're supposed to be billing to, because as PMs at the back end, right, we're reviewing the invoices and we want to make sure that we're not having to spend a lot of time moving time between phases because it's not efficient. Supporting files, photos. There's a folder for photos in the project folder. It's in multidisciplinary photo folder. And here's some examples for document naming, etc. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's there. It's right here. See, new. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yep.
Yeah, this is Steve Winkley.
Steve.
I was looking for a week or so ago a template. And there's lots of templates, but a report template, and I know that's going to vary from division and group to group. But do we have one?
There is one on the operations forms page. And it is, well, there was a report template. Now it's a report cover.
Yeah, I saw those, but, and actually,
Yeah, there was a report template. I don't know. I spoke with the person who's in charge of our branding now, Jamie, a few weeks ago, and we are working on a new report template to roll out to the company across all divisions. In the interim between now and then, Steve, you can use what you have,
yeah,
for the company.
that's what everyone
Yeah.
says. Yeah, just use an old report and.
Yeah, so we want to move away from that, which is why we had the conversation, because
Mhm.
ideally anything that we're putting out as a company should have the similar look and feel. And we
Right.
did have a template. We've kind of moved away from that when we're moving back towards doing that again. So thank you for the question. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So this comic is hilarious though, right? I mean, that's totally was me. I don't do that as much anymore, but I'm sorry, it was just too much. So again, however you name them will vary depending on your group, what you're doing. If you're working for like the DEC or another regulatory agency, they have also their own specific naming requirements that we have to follow. So there is flexibility, but there should be consistency. Any questions on that or comments? All right, next slide, please. All right, so leadership and communication. Next slide. So let's see, we're just about on track. We're gonna cover this section and we're gonna take our quick break at the halfway point. So leadership is something that you need to be a project manager. It is a skill that you can learn. If you are feeling as if you need some guidance on leadership, let us know. There are different tools that we have and different learning resources we have that we can point you to that will be helpful. In general, when you're leading a team, I outlined on this slide, things that happen are the indicators that maybe your leadership skills need a little bit of work, and none of us are perfect, don't get me wrong, versus when you have an effective leadership skill set and things are going well with the team. So if you've got an effective team, people know what they're doing, they're accountable, there's a lot of communication, people understand what they're supposed to be doing. People are actually listening to each other and raising their hand. If I've got a good team, people are going to know that they can come to me as a project manager with a question or something that they don't understand, that they see that they think is wrong. It's kind of an open dynamic. People should feel comfortable talking to each other and going to the project manager to make sure everybody's on the same page and know what's going on. If you've got a team that's not as effective, people won't know what they're doing. And I've been parts of both teams on both the technical end, and I've led teams that were effective and teams that weren't effective. I've learned a lot over the past, several decades. So it does take practice. Not everybody's got the skill sets automatically to begin with, but what you want to make sure is you've got a team that does know what they're doing, that they feel comfortable talking with you, and that you are able to work through conflicts that occur when you've got a team, because there's going to happen, right? Technician one thinks this approach is better than the approach provided by somebody else. You're gonna have to learn how to kind of work through things with people. So does anybody have any example of like a really good team that you were on where things went well, or something the project manager did or the technician did that somebody on the team member did that was helpful, that contributed to a successful experience? Or the vice versa. We've all been on teams that weren't quite so perfect, because perfection does not exist in life.
Hey, Kat.
Hey, Jake.
I think, this is where sometimes there's a little bit different dynamic between like divisions and things, right? Like my team is essentially my whole like it's the people I work with every day, right? Like it's not specifically for a project, this is the team. It's
Right.
just, I mean, it's kind of we're working together all day, every day on all of our projects.
Mhm.
But so I think one thing that works well for us is, on the effective side of things, lots of communication and also in a sense that relaxed atmosphere where, right, if somebody has an issue or needs the schedule to change for some reason, it's not a huge deal. It's just a matter of, right, bring it to Ryan or myself, one of the kind of the team leads here in the Richmond Waste and Recycling, and just, we kind of work through it. And it's a little bit of that life happens,
Yep.
things change, right? Like,
Yep.
but we've got you covered, but understanding at the same time, like, there's going to be other times where somebody else has something that goes on that they've got to shift gears or switch to another project or something, and kind of just everybody working together to keep people covered. But I think that's one of the differences I see, as opposed to like an architectural project. You
Mhm.
might have there's a start to finish, right? Designed to whatever they're building is built. And then, but some of our client, that may be it for that client until a new project starts or something like that. But for a lot of us that are on here, being from waste and recycling, we may have the same client and the same project for
20 years. Yeah.
20 years, 30 years. There's some of them have been our clients for that long.
Right.
And the people in the office may come and go, but the team is whoever's here.
Yeah. That's a very good point, though. I mean, a lot of this, whether or not you're talking about this from like a specific project management project team versus working with people within your group or your division as a team, the principles are the same. It is, and it's just dealing with people, right? And the most important thing, like you said, Jake, is just good communication to the team back and forth. And if people ask you questions or they're, complaining, I actually view that as good. It's like, tell me where things are wrong. Tell me what's not working. Tell me why you're not happy. And then, because if you don't know and somebody doesn't say something, then that often builds up during the course of a relationship or during the course of a project or whatnot. So the communication is definitely key. Next slide. Okay, so communication 101. I should have saved this as one of those questions, but 90% of a PM's time is spent communicating. So, and that includes all different forms of communication. That's probably the most important thing that we do. And yes, we're watching the scope, the schedule, the budget, but we are communicating everything internally within our teams and back and forth to the client. So communication skills are really, really important. And going back to what we learned from our marketing folks, it is really important to have our clients feel as if we are hearing them and understanding what their needs are. That's why we're here as a business, to provide them with a quality product. And in order to do that, we need to make sure we're communicating with them consistently, because the number one reasons why they leave isn't going to be because they thought we gave them a bad product. It's because they think that we're indifferent, or just that we don't care. Clients are people too. They want to feel as if they're being heard. And if we do care about them, which we do, so we're just keeping up good communication really helps with the relationship and mitigates also any risk that we could have coming down the road. If there's a problem and you're been communicating with your client and they know that you're working well for them and you're doing everything they can, they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt if there's a problem. So communication is key. So if something changes on a project, let everybody on the team know. I've been on plenty of teams where there was a change in like a search, not to pick on you, George, but like if there was a change in like a survey line or something, and then that had a trickle down effect to the wetlands delineation, which then had a trickle down effect to what could be built where. So everybody needs, the connection may not be obvious amongst all the technical disciplines on a project to begin with, but everything is connected. So making sure everybody's on the same page is really important. So to do that, we create a communication plan at the beginning of the project, which was one of those pages that I showed you in that plan document. And this last point here is super important. Make sure that we get things in writing. Going back to Brittany's question, like if we have a change, how do we deal with the paperwork? So we generally always want to make sure we're getting authorization for any additional services in writing. Okay. For some clients, some projects, if it's a very, very small ad or whatever, we can do some of those via email, but we're always going to want to get something in writing from the client authorizing us to provide whatever additional service or change it is. Memories are short, especially with some certain client types. Does anybody have an example of a project where we did something, the client said that they would pay us and then they gave us grief later? I've got lots, but.
I think each project I've ever worked on has been like that. I don't think that ever changes.
Yeah, and some client types are a little bit more aggressive than others I've found. Most municipalities tend to be a little bit more by the book and are a little bit better about being amenable to, because they're used to the structure and like the red tape and the paperwork from the municipal world, right? The agencies. A lot of sometimes our developers friends are less likely to want to sign a change order, or the memories feel sometimes like they have especially short memories. So just make sure we're getting things in writing.
I think my one issue is learning how to write shorter emails and things. So if someone has a way to show me how to do that quicker and easier, that'd be great, because I maybe over explain stuff and then no one reads that too, because it's so much that's in it that you lose the point of it. Just for other people write like that, because I hate reading it, but I write it like that too, so it doesn't make sense.
Well, you gave me a perfect segue, because I did want to share an example with you guys. The other thing, which we'll talk a little bit more later, is like knowing your client and understanding how they like to communicate. I'm gonna steal the screen back. Okay, I think I can just do it without. There we go. So what I've got up on the screen is an example of an email that I sent to a client. This was years ago, so it was a big development project. And Jerry was my primary point of contact. And during the early part of the project, we did have a discussion about like, how do you like to communicate? Now, this is not an email style that I would suggest we use as a template for communicating with clients, but he was a super busy guy. He told me himself, he said, I've got a really short attention span. If you send me an email, I want you to put the, do it by bullets, do it by numbers, put it in bold, 14-point red, highlight, whatever. So for him, this is what he wanted. He specifically said, do these things. I did it. I had do steps down in red with like, Jerry, this is what you're going to do. This is following our meetings. And this is how he wanted to communicate. And they were great relationship, long-term project. It worked really well. Can't do this. If I sent this to just anybody, they're going to think I'm incredibly rude, right? Who is this person sending me this email and all that? So it's just really important to highlight different clients have different communication styles, and you got to make sure you're communicating with them in the way that works best for them. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm sorry, did somebody say something? No. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say one thing. From my experience too, clients always seem to be more receptive to, or I should say less receptive when there's surprises. So, letting them know about something or a change or whatever after the fact they're just not very receptive to it. Whereas if you let them know up front and have, again, that open communication and explain, the situation and the change, it's way more well received.
Yep. Very good point. And you are foreshadowing to the fact that there's actually a slide towards the end on how to handle client problems. So, because we all have problems, either the client or the project, or something's going on, and how to approach those situations, and some catchphrases to use to make our lives easier. So,
Yeah, I think I'd add with the email, like, like you said, with how some clients like to interact, someone prefer phone calls versus emails.
Yep.
Especially if it is changes or things of that nature, but always trying to follow up with an email. That's something I probably didn't do enough when I first started, and came back to burn me a couple times. So it's just a matter of like, even on the phone call, hey, I'll send you that form, or I'll follow this up, and with the details again, so you have them, but just having that searchable record to go back and
yep.
pull up.
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
I have a conversation with the client, and I'll just say, hey, I'm just shoot you an email just to make sure I'm understanding exactly
Right.
what it is you're looking for us. And that way, through that process, you say, as per our conversation or whatever, and you outline it all. And you just say, if this is not what we talked about, or you need, something's different, let me know. It's in the record, right?
Right.
That's in the record.
And as Jeff said, it may be 14-page email, but at least you got it, right?
Yeah. So, okay, great. All right, so time for a short break. We normally do 10 minutes. Heather?
10 minutes.
Okay. All right, so we'll be back. We'll be back in 10 minutes, everybody. Okay, we are mostly back. If you are back, if you can if you can show your shiny faces again, that'd be great. Appreciate it. So let's see, we ended up with talking about communication. Before we move on to the next one, does anybody have any particular insights on good or bad communication that they experienced when they were a technical team member, not when they were project managing? Sometimes that's a good way to learn how to do things better if we were part of an experience where it didn't go well.
This is Mallory.
Hey,
I worked on a project at a previous firm that was kind of I wouldn't say high profile. I guess it was kind of a high profile, but it was just a really cool project. And the project manager kind of just checked out and let the lead design on the other team, on one of the other disciplines, kind of run with the project. And he definitely was more focused on his ultimate outcome for what the project should look like than any project management. So we ended up going, there's just no communication at all among disciplines. I probably redid, I'm a civil engineer. For those of you I don't know, I probably redid the utility and grading plans 5 or 6 times in response to changes he made. And we went over, I think, 50% over budget. It was just out of control.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a good example. That's a good example. And that's actually something that does tend to happen. I've noticed if you are, so there's different types of project managers, right? You could be a project manager who's also technically savvy. If you have the technical knowledge for, say, you're a civil project manager working on a civil project, you've got knowledge of the design, you know how to do all the design, you know how that works. There's also project managers like myself where I'm not an engineer. I just play one on TV, right? I'm managing a team of different technical disciplines. I'm kind of a step back from the specific technical pieces and understanding, I really can't get down into the weeds. Sometimes when we are wearing the dual hat, it's easy to let our own preferences for design influence what the project design pathway is going to be and what we're providing to the client. And it's really, really important to be aware of that bias, because sometimes somebody on your team may provide a design choice that is perfectly fine. If it's different than yours, you just have to kind of take a step back and say, well, this is technically correct. It works for the project. It may not be exactly how I would have done it, but and not spend a lot of time doing work and rework. And that actually happens also on projects where there may be a change. The project manager leaves the company, you get a new project manager, then all of a sudden everything is being all redone. You know, it's like, you got to be really aware of that. So that was a good example. Thank you. All right, next slide. Let's talk about one form of communication that we use a lot, which is meetings. Okay, we shouldn't hold a meeting just to hold a meeting. That kind of, that's been a popular saying. There's a reason for that, because we're busy. We need to make sure we're communicating to all the staff members. Meetings are often a really good way to do that, because you can get everybody in the room at the same time. Like, we are holding this training meeting, getting you all together in the same place at the same time, so you can all hear the same information. That's why meetings are great. It's also an opportunity for everybody to exchange ideas. So much of this training experiences, what's going right, what's going wrong. That's why we hold meetings. To hold a good meeting, though, you need to make sure that you've got all your objectives set in advance. Okay. You also need to consider, how long of a meeting do you need? Can it be a quick 15-minute touch base meeting? Does it have to be an hour-long meeting? Irrespective of which path it is and what the reason is, you need to communicate that to your team. Here's the reason for the meeting. Here's what our objectives are. Here's what we need to resolve by the end of the meeting. Okay. So just a few notes of that are here on the screen. And there is a template for meeting agenda, which is on that operations forms page. So you have that. All right, any questions about setting up for a meeting? What about bullet here where it says send an agenda with supporting materials in advance? How far in advance should we send the supporting materials to the team?
As soon as you possibly can, so they're in the loop, can look at it and come there, seeing what they need to know, and hopefully make it more of a quick meeting than trying to explain it all at that point.
Yep, so I often attach them to, either I will send the meeting invite with the materials attached to it. I've done it that way. I've also, depending on the size of the team and the personalities of the people on the team, I may send the meeting invite and then send a follow-up email with a note that, hey, you all got this meeting invite. Please make sure you accept. Here are the materials. I tend to like to put things in a folder, in the project folder for meetings versus attaching them, because I don't want to like have all, you know, the more attachments we have in our emails, the more, you know, data traffic, you know, we're creating. But for some staff that are working out of the office who may not have access to the server, you may need to do the attachment route. So, and it will vary. Sometimes I will, if the meeting is like 2 months in it, if it's too far in advance and you get them the information, then too much time passes and you need to send them a reminder closer to the meeting. But the key is to make sure that they have it in advance of the meeting, and that everybody understands that they are expected to review it before getting to the meeting. There's nothing more frustrating than getting to the meeting, sitting down, and half the team members haven't read the material. It's like, well, then I'm just going to reschedule the meeting, because I'm not going to sit here and spend, you know, this time reviewing stuff, because it's not going to be efficient. So, all right, next slide, please. Okay. Most of this should be pretty, I think pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through all little notes on here, except to say that I know when I'm managing a meeting, I have a hard time managing the meeting, being intellectually like engaged and hearing everything that the team members have to say and take notes at the same time. So I often assign somebody to take notes. And it's also actually a good learning experience, especially for younger staff members, to take notes, because then they can kind of go back and kind of rehear what was said during the meeting. So, and at the end, make sure everybody understands what it is that we agree are the take homes. So at the end of every meeting, I say, okay, so here's what I think I heard. One of the most valuable lessons I learned from Dan Stone, who was my mentor at Chazen for many, many years, is it's pretty much guaranteed that you get a bunch of people in a room and you talk and you say something, everybody's going to leave that room with a different idea, with a different understanding of what exactly was said and what the take homes were. So what's something that we can do to prevent that from occurring. Anybody, any of the mics? I've got a couple mics.
Like you said earlier, have somebody take the minutes of the meeting, and then if you're given the meeting, review it and make sure it's relevant, on point, and then shoot out an email.
Yes,
Or
exactly.
let everybody at least, and then if anybody has any questions, if anybody had, took it had something that they didn't agree with, or they didn't notice, or they thought differently of, and clarify.
Absolutely. That's just right. So I'm going to go to that on the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about that. Does everybody understand this little my little cartoon here? I had to modify it. I'm not really that great at these things, but number of meetings I've been in where somebody was on their phone and they got distracted and then they missed a point, and then it's like, whoops, sorry, like, can you repeat that? And like the whole flow of the meeting gets interrupted. So there are times when we may need to be in a meeting and have our phone on because there's something urgent that's going on in the field or an emergency, but 9 times out of 10, generally speaking, phone should be off, silenced during the meeting so we can really focus on what we're doing.
I've noticed with all these fancy watches, people get distracted very easily. So I think it's important to pause and try to, especially if if it's an important part of a discussion, to make sure everybody gets back in line.
Yep.
Alignment.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, I mean, my phone gives me text messages, and I have to make a concerted effort to not look. It's taken me a little bit of practice, but I'm in the meeting. I'm in the meeting to get it done because I don't like missing things. I like conversation, and I want to make sure I'm being efficient and the team is being efficient. So, does everybody raise your hand if you've heard of what a parking lot is? No, not a whole lot of raised hands. So the parking lot on a meeting is a really valuable approach, because most of the time you're going to be in a meeting, there's always going to be some point where somebody starts to get off topic a little bit. And sometimes those off topic conversations are valuable. Maybe not necessarily for that particular conversation that day, but there is value in them. So when you start up the meeting, something to do is just talk about the concept of the parking lot and say, we're here to talk about X, Y, and Z today. If something comes up that's related to this, but isn't directly applicable to what we're talking about today, I'm going to write it down and put it in the parking lot so we can come back to it, set up a separate meeting for it, or talk to you about it separately later. It's basically a way to prime everybody who's in the meeting to understand that you're here to get these things done. And if somebody starts rambling on, which it happens, I've been a rambler, right? Starts rambling on, you can say to that person, that's a really great point. Let me put that on my parking lot note. You can even have, if it's a big meeting, oftentimes you'll see people use those really big, sticky notes, the big boards, and they'll just write parking lot items there to have everybody understand that, yes, there is value in that concept, but we're going to come back to that later. So, okay, next slide. After the meeting, look at that. Distribute meeting minutes and notes and follow up as needed. So you're going to send a meeting that says, hey, thanks for the great meeting. It's very productive. Here's the take homes. And in those emails, I usually say, if there's something that's different than what you heard, let me know. Similar to with our clients, right? Go on the record with your team. This is what we understand. This is what I think we all agree, because again, people hear things differently based on their experience and their perspective and just, life. So when you are done with your meeting, you want to take a look and say, did actually we accomplish the goals of the meeting? Right? You had the meeting. Did you do what you said you were going to do? If it didn't, that gives you something to start off on, something to think about for next time. How can you refine the approach that you have to your meetings or for the particular topic? Sometimes life happens, things don't go quite well. Either you need to set up another meeting or you need to kind of get back to the topic for whatever reason. Ask your team what worked, what didn't. Similar to these training sessions, right? We send out a little link after every training session. We say, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. Did it work? Did it not work? Maybe there's a different way to direct the flow, a different order you can put your people who are discussing their topics during the meeting. Sometimes just switching things up will help. Okay. And then yet again, there's a template for meeting minutes on LaBella today. Okay. Any comments, questions, anything about meeting minutes and what to do after the meeting? Okay. We're going to move on to the exciting world of QA/QC. And I'm going to ask you a question, which is, do the projects that you guys work on, do they have quality assurance or quality control or peer reviews occurring on the project? So raise your hand if the projects that you work on are having some sort of quality review occur. Okay, most hands are raised, a few not quite so high as others. That is to be expected because depending on the type of project, the types of reviews that a project undergoes will vary. Okay. The concept of QA/QC, which we have a nice QA/QC quality management program here at LaBella, and we're currently working on a corporate manual, which will have the basic terminology laid out for everybody, is to make sure that we have got good quality assurance at the beginning, which is everything that we're doing in terms of using templates, putting together the right staff on a project, and then making sure we've got the control pieces along the way to ensure that the work is being checked. And there's lots of different ways to do that. It will vary depending on the product and the division, but there are some general consistencies between them. So which is what we're gonna go through. So next slide, please. So quality assurance, just like I said. So some examples of quality assurance are, guides. Some of the divisions actually have QA/QC guides, checklists. There are checklists for doing review of specific design types to make sure all the different elements are there. We've got standard operating procedures for certain things, standard details and sheets. These are everything that you're doing like upfront to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot. Quality control is when you're actually implementing everything and doing the reviews of the documents. You can have different types of reviews. If I'm building a building, if I'm doing a full site plan review, I'm going to want to make sure at some point there I've got a constructability review to make sure that everything is actually going to work. If you've got a project that's got, let's say it's got wetlands on it, they're going to do their work at some point. They're going to review their work with the technical specialist. And if there's a change on the project, you may have to do another review just to be on the safe side, because one thing changes, there's often a trickle down effect. So one other review that's listed down on here is call it the over the shoulder review, which is essentially as we are working on a project and we have our teams, there's going to be a person that is in charge of that technical element, and they're going to be working with the person who's producing that work, say it's a CAD drafter, to make sure that things are progressing in the design in the way that they should. And I call those over the shoulder reviews. They're not formal reviews, but it is an iterative process between the person who is the technical lead and the person who's doing the design work. And I use the term design to apply across the board. I'm not just talking engineering design, but if somebody's developing like a groundwater sampling program, right, for a particular type of, for a landfill, you're going to want to make sure that the technical lead is taking a look at it as they're producing that approach to make sure that they're on target. So, okay, any questions about QA/QC? Let's see, and somebody who hasn't spoken already. Anybody have any examples of a review that was done or wasn't done on a project that they worked on that created an issue, or any QA/QC stories? New speaker.
chime in.
Okay, Charlie.
So yeah, I had to in my previous work stuff, a little outside of what people normally do, but I was doing big wetland and habitat restoration projects. So you had a lot of different contractors involved, whether it was people that were doing earth moving for, tile, removing tile or ditch plugs or even embankment construction. At the same time, you'd have tree planting contracts that were planting trees or applying herbicides or other stuff. So a lot of times, we would go out there and you're having to document what they were actually able to do. Maybe they were planting trees when it was way too wet and we weren't getting a tree setter to actually seal back the planting furrow when the ground was too wet. So those are all things you had to document, because then, at the end of the project and all the trees that you just planted were dead, you can document the fact that that tree planter was planting when conditions were way too wet and the equipment wasn't sealing the furrow back. So, having a constant, documentation of conditions and what they were doing right and wrong could ultimately, you could document why the project was a success or a failure.
You nailed it, right? So everybody, that's a great example. Again, and I like the fact, Charlie, that, it's outside of the standard like design QA/QC model, because the concept of quality assurance and quality control is right in the name. We're trying to assure quality and we're trying to control the quality because we want the end product to work, which means throughout the way we are implementing different procedures and policies and inspections and control measures to make sure that we end up where we need to be. And the QA/QC program it's documentation. We actually are signing a piece of paper or providing inspection or providing an email back, documenting what that is along the way. So that's a great example. All right, let's move to the next slide. So why do we need QA/QC? Anybody have a favorite on here? Anybody not agree with anything on here?
I find QA/QC is needed, but most time people don't schedule enough time for it to properly happen or put budget in for it, and people get upset when too many people are doing it. So I think it's just a mindset a lot of people got to get into. That's got to be done, and you got to allow for it.
Yep. Well, that goes on the next couple slides. I'll be talking about all those things, Jeff, because it is QA/QC for some reason. You're right. It seems to always be like a kind of a last minute idea. The way the process is supposed to work is, I'm going to call on somebody. If you're really, really not comfortable, just shoot, just say pass or whatever. But I want to know, so Celia, if that's okay if I ask a question, at what point do we start thinking about QA/QC? When does it start?
As soon as we have a deliverable available, or as,
Yeah. So this is something to think about. As project managers, what we are doing when we are developing after we've had a first call with the prospective client, we are already in the back of our minds, we're already starting to think about QA/QC. So if you get a call from a client, they want you to develop a design, they want you to build a house. Here's my house example again, right? As soon as you put pen to paper, you need to be thinking about who's the team going to be? What is the review process going to be? How much money am I including in the scope for quality assurance and quality control? Who is my reviewer going to be? Who is going to be signing off on the plans? All these things that actually happen like at the very beginning. So it's actually at the opportunity stage, the very, very beginning. When we are progressing through the project, some of the harder, like actually the control reviews, right? Those reviews by the technical leads and whatnot, those do happen later in the process. That's when they actually happen in the timeline. But the thought process from the project management perspective, it starts at the very beginning. And if we do that, we're less likely to have the problems that happen down the road, like that Jeff was mentioning, that I'll go over in these couple slides. So that's perfect. Our insurance company does care that we have a QA/QC program. They want to know that we're doing that because they will, if we don't have a QA/QC program at all, we're going to have more mistakes and we're going to have more claims and our rates can go up. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the benefits of QA/QC. When you are in the field and you are a construction inspector, or you have folks who are working for you who are construction inspectors, they're the ones who are dealing with the design errors that occur. So it's often really, really helpful to get a review by somebody up front with who's got more construction experience to take a look at your design plan specifically before they go out the door. They call that the constructability review. Just wanted to mention that one. So I've got a section on here for what gets reviewed. Most everything that goes out of the office has to have some sort of review. Not everything needs a formal review with a piece of paper that's signed off that says, I, Brian Van Auker, reviewed this plan set and it looks good. Okay, not everything needs that formal of a review. The ones that need a formal review, you will no doubt know, they're the ones that have the higher risk, like big plan sets, important, big basis of design reports, engineering reports, wetland delineation documents, habitat assessments, anything that has a degree, a higher level of risk associated with it. Those are going to need some sort of formal review. If it is a letter or a proposal or a memo, probably not so much. And it's going to vary by division. So as we work through the development of the corporate program with the divisions, there will be guidance on what gets reviewed and what doesn't need review. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, kind of goes to some of what we're talking about. When does it happen? All the time. So, and this is how we do it. Proposal, startup, preliminary design, CDs, construction, end of project, all parts of the project. We are thinking about what we're doing to make sure that what we're putting out on the street is correct. Okay. For construction documents, it is especially important that we make sure that they've gone through the full QA/QC process, because if there is an issue in the field, I can guarantee you that the cost of the time, the extra time that would have been spent on doing a review that people thought, oh, let's just get it out the door, we don't really need to do the review. The cost of doing that review is going to be less than the cost that it's going to take to fix it in the field. Think anytime we go to construction, there's change orders. Anytime there's something that's different from what's in the plans, the contractor is going to want a change order. You're going to have to negotiate with the contractor. You're going to have to fess up to the client that, oops, this wasn't correct. It's always going to take. I've not heard of a single time when we had an issue from an absence of QA/QC where it would have cost more to do the QA/QC than it would to fix it in the field. Does everybody agree with that? Mostly nodding heads. Yeah. If you've been involved with any construction projects, contractors constantly looking for ways to get change orders. So, and the reality is that mistakes are going to happen. It just is life. So the more we can do to limit them, the better we're off. So, okay. There's one note on here, technical change equals technical review. I alluded to that earlier. You think you're all done with the plan set, but a line moves, or somebody wants to move. There was a good one on the project a couple of years ago where they wanted to move, this was on a wastewater plant, they wanted to move a door. Okay. No big deal, right? Just move the door. They want to move it from this side to this side. Okay. Huge headache. Changed all the grading because it changed the grading. Moving the door from like one side of the building to the other side of the building created issues with the mechanical space and the setbacks and the clearances. And it was a painfully expensive lesson to me on the fact that like one seemingly minor change can take thousands of dollars worth of effort. And then you get to the end and you're like, crud, I just should have just said no, So just keep that in mind. All right, next slide. All right, so it's almost as if Jeff foresaw that the slide was coming. So these are some of my favorite things, some of which I've said, I'm not a perfect angel. I've, been doing this a long time and we all learn along the way, but why is it so hard to get this done? Anybody have a particular favorite on the list that they hear a lot? Kevin? Any projects you've been on where you heard anything in particular that's?
I think, we do a lot of smaller scale projects and waste and recycling. And so fitting things into the budget and also the time wise tends to be quick turnaround and low budget and all of these things. So people try to get by, but
yeah. Yep. Been there, done that. Another, I don't know if it's on here, but, oh yeah, it is on here. This job was just like the last one. Why do I have to review it? This phase one's just like that other phase one we did. Why do we need to have a review? There's plenty of reasons why.
I know why, because the old name of the county is on it and other things are wrong a lot of times, you find.
Yeah, so I've got a perfect example, like you're reading my mind, Jeff. So I was the manager for this Dover Knolls development project, and I was the PM, just the PM. I was not a technical lead on anything. We had, it was a huge project, a lot of different phases. Design plans were going out. They were like preliminary, maybe they were like a little past 30% designs, but along with and towards the end, there was a plat that was going out, and I took a look at the survey plat, which luckily we did not, which the company I was working for at the time did not prepare, but this plat had been, a couple years old, back and forth, things had changed. I looked at it as a last set of eyes, right? And the PM, I just wanted to take a look at everything together, wrong counting on every single sheet. Really? So it just kind of highlights that everybody brings something to the team when it comes to quality assurance and quality control. And that's one of the key messages that we're putting in our corporate quality assurance, quality control plan manual, because if you're looking at a document and you're in the weeds and you've looked at it too many times, you're not going to see some of the mistakes, just like what county it is. So it's really important to have everybody feel like they are part of the process, because somebody who's making a copy may notice something that the entire design team may not notice. So everybody should feel empowered to say, hey, this doesn't look right, and speak up. But the client won't pay for it is a tricky one. Some clients appreciate QA/QC and you can have a separate task. Other clients really just want to assume that it's happening in the background, and they get touchy when they see a separate line item for it, in which case you build it into the phase, right? It's just in the phase, it's in the budget. You don't have a separate phase or line item for it in there. I know what I'm doing. There's no need for somebody else to review. I'm sorry, but nobody's perfect. And if you look at something for too long, you're going to miss something. I know I have. So, and then there's just one more thing to do at the end. That's the whole point of this, is it's not something that's at the end. It should be at the forefront at the beginning. And it's a cultural change that we're going to have to, that every company struggles with. So, okay. Any other comments from anybody? No? Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. So how do we make this happen? So in the world of education, I've found out that the most effective way to have people do something is to educate them on the why. Okay, kind of goes without saying, but if I'm being told that I need to fill out a PIF form, or if I'm being told that I need to fill out a new hire form when I'm hiring somebody new, unless I understand the why of that, I may be resistant to doing that, because it's just going to be more paperwork, right? So the reason we need to fill out PIFs is because not everybody might realize it. You fill out the PIF, it goes in email, and email goes out to like 20 different people, a whole team of people. There's a lot of different people that are behind the scenes, getting things in process, getting folders set up, getting everything set up. Same thing has to do with, this outside of PM world, but like the new hire forms, right? You need to fill out the entirety of a new hire form. There's a reason that goes out to like 30 different people in the company. So there's a reason behind things. So if you explain to your team why we're doing it and how they're part of it and how they can make it a better product, yada, yada, then they're more likely to embrace the QA/QC. Okay. this is a little ditty here. Good QA is a key to painless QC. Does everybody understand what that means? We want to speak it back to me in regular language. No. So basically, if you plan for things and oh, Brian, you're gonna, thank you.
No, I was just gonna say,
I hear myself talk.
being strategic and having a focus on process improvement, a good quality assurance will make QC minimal.
Yep. If you start off right, you're gonna have a better product at the end than if you start off all haphazard and then if they're hoping at the end to fix everything, right? It's also gonna cost you more money. And on projects where we are, say, lump sum, that means we're losing money. And on projects where it's time and materials and when somebody might say, well, if there's a change, we can go back to the client, they're going to end up paying more money and they're not going to be happy. So, it really behooves us to think about this up front to make sure we're putting out the right product, quality product, and everybody's on the same page. So QA/QC review. Let me see a show of hands. Who of you have seen some sort of QA/QC review form for documenting a review that's been done within your discipline? Show of hands. Okay, we've seen a couple. So not as many as I would like to see, but we've got a couple of raised hands, which is good. So like I mentioned, depending on the type of product it is, you may not need to have a written signed off piece of paper in the folder for the project. What we're moving towards is creating some sort of template form that would work for the company across all divisions. It's a work in progress, but I wanted to show you an example of something that has been used, which does work, and I can provide it if you would like to start using it. Each division is a little bit different. I'm going to just say that a million times. And some divisions actually do have their own forms, but so this is very draft. This is a quality assurance quality review form. And the way it's set up is you can put a drop down for, say you're doing an electrical review, you can drop down 60%. Is it a QC review or a peer review? There's differences, which we're not going to go into today. What type of review, signature, and then the name. And all you've got to do is basically fill this out. And then when you're done and you've signed off on it, you sign it, PDF it, goes saved in the folder, and that's your documentation. So each division, some divisions already have something like this for what they're doing. And I will show you a few down here. So this is like kind of a master overview form. There's a tab on here, which is not complete, but it started to populate at one point, like what types of documents need to actually have a review versus just a review versus what need a signed form. And then this workbook has all the different forms that I've found within the company so far that are like checklists and different reviews for different divisions. So this is one that the civil group has. Some folks within the civil group, which came over from Shays. And so this is a list of what should be on 30%, 60%, 90% construction documents. It's a good training tool also. This is a different form that civil uses, civil landscape uses. We've got one from structural, things that they use for, then the building system. So there's quite a few in here that are from the different divisions that have all been compiled into one. Over the next several years, we're going to be working on individual QA/QC plans for the divisions, and hopefully some of this will be refined a little bit. But I wanted to let you know that this as it exists now, which is not complete, it does exist. And especially at this first form, if you're looking for something to use as an easy sign-off form, this is an option that we have. So, any questions about forms? And
hey, Kat, where's that form at? Is it on the?
This one's I haven't posted because it's a little drafty, but I can send it to you.
Cool, please. That'd be great.
So. Okay, let me stop sharing and go back to our presentation. All right, next slide, please. Okay, our favorite, managing the client. The easiest thing to do, right? Totally the easiest thing to do, managing the clients. People are just always so easy. Next slide, please. So I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the most difficult parts of being a project manager. You know, communication, managing the team is tough, but sometimes a difficult client can be incredibly challenging and can put us all, can tax our resources. So the couple of things you can do in advance as you're approaching your client and understanding the project and what their needs are to make sure that, you know, you're getting a good relationship going and to kind of head off some of those problems. One of which is to really know your client. An example was that one email I shared with you. I really knew that client really well. So I knew what they wanted, communication style. I knew what they wanted, like how they like their meetings set up. I knew what they were looking for in their deliverable. You've got to really know what their needs are, and also culturally who they are, like what type of organization are they from. That's all really important because different organizations and entities operate differently. The client who I mentioned, he was the attorney for a land development company. It's like his brain worked a certain way. I came to know him and understood how it was best to communicate with him. So be proactive and consistent with communication. This is a theme, right, of project management with your team as well with your client. Getting confirmation decisions and changes in writing should sound familiar. And then the most important thing that you've got on here on the slide, it has 2 stars, a star on either side. It's like, don't be afraid to ask somebody for help. Raise your hand if you've managed a project and you had a problem. Right? It's going to happen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just life. So understanding that it happens to everybody is number one. And number 2 is knowing that you should never be afraid to ask for help. Somebody had a raised hand. I don't know if that was temporary blip or no. Okay.
I was just going to add, like, confirmation of decisions is quite important, like with scope changes, et cetera. And some clients are very hard to get something in writing, whether an email or
it's an understatement. Yes.
Yeah, or, very important, a proposal or contract. But if something's communicated text or phone or whatever, take a screenshot of it and follow it up with an email. Even if the client doesn't respond, at least you have just to clarify, this is what we're changing, or this is what we discussed, this is what we're doing.
Yep.
Because at least you have, and I always archive, like, I sent that email for blah, blah, blah project. That way, if it ever comes back up, you have something, even if they didn't respond.
It's on the record. Yep.
Like one of those ghost clients, So.
They're there. It's
Right.
just not very responsive. Yep. So this little timeline here at the bottom, kickoff, milestone, client update, potential problem, client update. There's a theme here, right? Just you got to keep them appraised all along the way. So, all right, next slide, please. So here's some facts of life. We talked earlier about mitigating risk through client relationships. Also want to talk a little about something that marketing mentioned at the beginning when they did their discussion, which is the 80-20 rule. So another reason to make sure we're trying to do our very best for communicating with the client, knowing the client, being good project managers is the 80-20 rule. It is much more cost effective for us as a business to keep getting repeat revenue from existing clients than it is to try and go after new work. That's just the way it is. So the better job we do at project management, which is why this training is so important if you are involved in project management anyway and understanding how we do this. This is how we're going to keep our clients happy and how we're going to have them continue to come back to us and do more work for them in the most efficient way. So I mentioned this previously, clients leave because they're basically because they're not feeling the love, right? They feel as if we're not communicating with them enough. Maybe we're not hearing what they think they're asking us for. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort to get yourself into the same mindset as your client and understand what it is that they're asking for when they ask for an addition, like an addition. Okay, you want an addition. What is the purpose of the addition? Why do you want that addition? A lot of client communication is actually education. Been on preliminary projects like let's say that had seeker work, and they did not understand like how the seeker process worked. If you were going to be doing a project, they didn't understand the timeline, they didn't understand the reviews and the process. And a lot of times, if you have a client that's not as savvy, you will need to account for that educational element when you're setting up the project. So when you're talking to the clients at the beginning, when you're scoping the opportunity and preparing the proposal, try and get a good sense of how much knowledge base this person is coming to the project with. Okay. So last bullet is people like to do business with people they know and like. And I'm continued to develop relationship with clients, and I still am in contact with people that I became friends with after having them as a client. I no longer have them as a client, but they're still part of my kind of my social network. And you can manage, or we talked earlier about, you can manage your risks through strong client relationship. Anybody have examples of some things you've done to keep a strong client relationship going? Or things you've heard of somebody doing? Hillary, I don't know, you haven't said anything yet. Have you heard of any approaches or seen somebody do something that you thought was a good example of that?
They love lunch.
They love lunch, food. You can never go wrong with food. Send them cookies, take them to lunch. That is a perfect example. Perfect example. So let's go to the next slide. Here we go. Kind of a summary of several things that we've talked about, right? Proactive communication. These are all techniques for managing the client and managing the relationship. Regular status, knowing them. I don't know if I can pull it up quickly or not enough, but I had a client, really big project, that team sheet I showed you where I had a list of all the different team members. I had it all populated. I had a snapshot of what each one looked like. I had little notes on the side. This person's got 2 kids and they really love baseball. You really want to know that much about your clients because you can talk with them about things. You're developing the relationship and people are just interesting, right? So it's always good to have that personal touch. Understanding their business is really, really important because you may be dealing with Joe, but if Joe's not actually the one who's making decisions and you propose something to Joe and he comes back every time and says, no, you need to understand what their corporate structure is or what their business structure is and how that's affecting how they're making decisions. Okay. We talked about some of these already. This next one is important. What if I have bad news? So somebody mentioned this previously, and if you have bad news, do not, I will say, number one thing to do is do not ever send them an email. First off, if I'm going to be getting bad news from somebody, nothing's going to annoy me more than somebody that sends me an email and says, oh, by the way, your project's delayed. I'm going to be like, dude, like, why didn't you call me and tell me so I can understand? Again, if somebody understands the reason behind something, it's the conversation and the relationship and the project is going to go better. So make sure that you reach out to them first before they call you if there's a delay or something's going to be happening, and have solutions ready. So if I know that I'm going to miss a deadline on a project and it's going to have trickle down effects. So if I'm going to miss my 60% deliverable to New York State DEC for a wastewater treatment plant process review, what effect is that going to have on the entire timeline and how can we mitigate that effect on the back end, right? Because that's what the client has certain goals in mind. They want X built by or X done by or whatever done by a particular timeline. If you're going to miss some part of that, either the deliverable or the timeline or the cost, if you come to them with options, it's going to go better. Anybody have an example of a project where they did that or? Scary conversations. Yeah.
I had a project with my last firm. We're doing some asbestos abatement. The project monitor we had out there didn't tell me there was an issue with the contractor. He ended up breaking down a bunch of tents that weren't cleared yet. And it was a pretty big issue. He told me when he got back to the office after 5 o'clock. So I couldn't say anything to the client at that point.
Yeah.
That's a communication issue that, we discussed after that. So the next day I just got up early. I went out there, took some pictures of the area before the client even got there. And then just went into the job trailer and said, hey, this is what's going on. We need to talk about it. And, while he was upset that day, it ended up being a much stronger relationship going forward because, we handled it in a way of, hey, I showed up. I'm trying to figure this out. Let's figure this out together. And it ended up being so much better than, even calling him, or especially if I sent an email. I mean, that would have been
no good. Yeah.
No.
That's a perfect example, Cameron. Thank you for sharing. And actually goes back to something I think that Beth said in her presentation. Some companies have built in, issues that have to be resolved. We don't do that. But the fact of the matter is, how we handle ourselves and work with our clients when there are issues can often lead to a much stronger relationship. Okay. So all problems some of them are actually opportunities. Right? They're opportunities for growth and opportunities for managing the client relationship. So, all right, next slide. Thank you. And I know we're almost out of time here. So the client touch is just just a concept of making sure you're continually kind of like reaching out to your client, touching them so that they know that that they are of interest to you. So some of them these touches can be done like within the context of the project, but some of them are just like sending them an article on something that they mentioned that they were interested in, asking about their family, thank you notes. If they've got a business and we've got somebody, or somebody who's doing a talk, provide them with the talk. LaBella has lots of super educated, super well-versed, knowledgeable people there. And there are clients where we have pulled together talks from our internal resources and provided talks to clients. Lunches, yes, perfect example. If they belong to organizations, join that organization, and sometimes you can just call them for no reason and just call them to say hi. I like to do that internally with people just to I like people, I want to talk to them. So how's it going? It's not a work call, just, call in and touch base and say hello. So, all right, next slide. Problem clients and problems. We're running out of time here, but I think can get down to, we've covered some of this already, but if you have a problem on the client, whether on the project, whether or not it's your fault or somebody else's fault, because, like I said, we're human, we all make mistakes. First of all, don't panic. You're going to have resources to help you through it. I've had that sinking feeling in my stomach more times than I want to count. But just know that you will be able to work through it, and like I said, may end up being something positive that comes out of it at the end. So if you are the recipient of a phone call from a client who is mad, okay, the best advice I can give you is to just kind of stay calm, just pretend, just be impartial, stay calm. Sometimes people just want to vent, right? That's important to know. If they are venting about something and they are yelling and you're very upset and they have an ask of you, make sure that you are able to just kind of, what I do is I try and just take a deep breath and let them know that I'm hearing what your concern is. I want to fix this with you. But you need to make sure that you have time to gather information that you need and get back to them. Get to your team internally, go to somebody more senior, whatever you need to do. And most importantly, go back to the project scope, schedule, cost to make sure that you haven't forgotten something that was in the scope. Sometimes the clients will be all upset over something that they thought they were going to get, but it actually isn't in the scope, in which case you can have the conversation with them. So I have this little prompt here, right? They're asking for something. They're telling you, yes, it's in the scope. I know we talked about it. It's not in the scope. And you can say, that is a fantastic idea. You are smart and wonderful. And what a great idea. I've checked back looked at our scope, but guess what? It's not in there. Let's talk about how we might handle this moving forward. So maybe they want to switch out funds for one thing for this new thing. There's different ways to handle, but just, you can always say, it's a great idea. I checked, it's not there. Let's figure out how we can do this. They're paying us for our consulting ability and our brains and our technical expertise. You should never feel as if you need to give something away for free. Okay. We are a business. We want to put out a good work product and have good relationships, but we need to make sure that we're getting paid for our hard work. Promise, only 2 more minutes. This one is important. Decisions and risk. It's very important to distinguish between when a client is, if there's a decision that a client is making, and it's one that we perhaps do not necessarily agree with, but they are taking the risk, and it is their risk alone as the client, and it's their money. It's a business decision on their end. Okay, we are consultants. We provide design. We will sign off on the things that we ethically can sign off on, but we are not taking on the ideas that we're not taking on their risk. So if they make a decision that is contrary to something that we would be recommending, make sure we've got it documented in the file. Okay, because there are some clients that do that. They try and like put the risk onto us, and we need to make sure we're clear on what's not. Get it in writing. The bigger the risk, the more formal the documentation. Simple, small change, small risk associated item. An email might be fine, but the more formal, the bigger they ask, the more formal the documentation is going to be. And get more information. Sorry, don't try and get sucked in by the dangling carrot, because they'll say, oh, if you do this one extra thing for me, I'll give you the next phase of the project. I'll give you the next, section of the development. I've been suckered before. Please don't do that. Luckily, it wasn't a big ask. But especially developers tend to do this a lot, not to generalize, but that's the case. And then lastly, but not least, Brittany is available. She talked about it as a resource. If we need feedback from a client after the project is done, say there were problems. If you want to get feedback, we all want to improve and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to get us to where we want to be. Brittany is very good and adept at talking with clients and getting feedback. So in a productive way. So questions. That was a lot. I know it was a lot. Is there anything that I guess any last questions before we sign off?
I don't think it's a question. It was just a comment regarding not getting ridiculed or a bad phone call from a client and telling them bad news. I think instead of procrastinating, we need to tell them right away. A lot of what we do is we're messengers, so we can't change data or a delineation line or, like wetlands or, if this ground is suitable to build something. And the more you sit on that, the more the client has the opportunity or may get really upset and may throw a wrench in their whole schedule, et cetera. So, tell them bad news quicker versus later.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and especially pertinent to, I know, to environmental services. A lot of clients are not, especially with like phase 1 ESAs or wetland delineation, where the end product is something which is going to basically say you have a problem where you don't have a problem. Like plenty of phase 1s, because I started out in environmental services, I would do a phase 1, and guess what? There was an illegal auto repair garage, and there was a septic tank. Guess what? Septic tanks, any of those kinds of systems that are on areas where you're using oils that gets down in there and it's a problem and it gets contaminated. That's a bad news. I had nothing to do with the passes through the project, but you're right, Michael, we're the messengers. And wetland delineation, the lines over here versus over here, they can't build what they want. It's not our fault. We're just the messengers. These are what the regulations say. This is how it works. And then you just kind of have to work through the issues with them and educate along the way. So that was a good example. All right. All right. I think we're good. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate you keeping your cameras on and all the participation today, because I like hearing everybody's stories and learning from everybody.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you,
all. Have
Ken.
a great afternoon.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.